Hi everyone, it's Andrew here from Stitch, and you're watching History in the Making. This is the very first This Week on Stitch. One of the things that we've noticed as Stitch has grown is it's harder and harder to get that personal connection and let everyone know what's happening in the community. So much of what happened when we first started was to build communities in person. And you know, I've spent a lot of time meeting our members in various communities around the world when we first get a community started. And that's great for me. I get all these great personal connections, but it's really hard to then get everybody to know what's happening at the end of, at the end of a week or what's happening in the community. So we just thought, look, let's not overthink this. What about at the end of the week on Friday night, my time, I'd sit back, I'd get a glass of this is a Chardonnay, try to relax and tell you all a little bit what's happening in the community. Not so much what I'm doing or what the team's doing, but really what the community's doing, because there's a lot of amazing things happening. And over time, I'm hoping that you'll all send in your stories or things that you'd like us to cover. And, think of it like just a chat. Like everything on Stitch, we're a community. So much of it's about conversation and connection. So I'm kind of hoping this helps a little bit. Don't expect a lot of production values. I'm just going to record myself talking to a camera. And if I go off on a ramble for a little bit, that's just me. I've got no one to pull me into rain. I'll try to keep on focus. So for this first one, rather than just what's happened this week, it's really, we'll probably cover a few weeks. In fact, I'm planning on covering what's been happening in the last couple of months. A bit of focus just on the good news stories, some of the good stuff. Next week, I'll probably talk a little bit about some of our challenges. But both of them are important. It's really good to share some good news stories. In fact, today I gave an interview with an NPR TV outlet in San Diego, and hopefully they'll be publishing our story with not just my interview, but some of our local community champions shortly. And at the end of the interview, the journalist said to me, Andrew, I can't tell you how much I've loved covering this story because it's finally I'm able to tell some good news. She said she was covering all of these stories of people dying in aged care homes and things like that. And to hear about community members and our champions and just everyone in the community doing something good for each other and positive and so different from what's out there so often in the world. It was actually great to hear that from her. And for all of our members in San Diego, if you spoke to her and she interviewed you, thank you, because you've obviously done a wonderful job. Anyway, let's just switch over to, I'm going to share my screen out and we'll be covering a few of these slides. And this is basically This Week on Stitch. As I said, the good stuff. Let's start with the good stuff. And I don't know if you have attended one of our virtual events so far, but if you haven't, you are missing out. These events are fantastic. I've got to say, when we first started, I was a little bit skeptical about really, a virtual event is kind of, it's like a second-rate cousin to getting together in person. But it turns out, actually, there's a bunch of things that happen in these virtual events that you can't really do in person. And what we've stumbled onto, our team and some of our members around the place are creating these big events that then get divided up into smaller icebreakers. We've done them across California, across the US, across the UK, Australia, and so on. And the way it works is everyone gets together in a big Zoom group, and it's not a lot of socializing that can happen when there's so many people on a call. But what we do is we randomly just put people into these small groups where they get to have a chat, 10 minutes. So you can't get too apprehensive about it. You don't have great high expectations, but by the same token, what's to lose. And remarkably, every time we do this, we can see the smiles getting bigger and bigger as the meeting goes on. People love the idea of just having a bit of a chat. It's a way to kind of break the ice. And then what happens after that, we're seeing that a lot of people then get really inspired to say, oh, well, I could do that. That's something I really like to do and connect. And we're starting to see this explosion of activity in the community. It's really, really cool. And I've got to say, not something I completely expected. So we're seeing some events and activities that are created by us, but also by our members. But we started it ourselves. And originally we thought, oh, well, they might not get very big. And they started, we had 23 people, and then suddenly it was 33 people, 51 in the 60s, 70s, and then the 80s. And then this week, I had an event where we had 278 people marked down to attend. This was a USA-wide quick stitch fast friendship event. Now, if you did attend that event, you'll know we had a bit of a hiccup. So that's our bad news, a little bit of bad news. Unfortunately, Zoom, we had to upgrade to a much more expensive plan on Zoom, and they didn't process our account right. So it allowed us to get 300 people to register, but only 100 people could come in. It was very, very frustrating and difficult. And I'm really, really sad about the people who tried to get and missed out. We're getting that fixed up. And next week, we'll be running another one and more after that. The point is, this kind of growing appetite for people to start to get involved in the community, get to know people kind of virtually, and then allow that to move into the real world has been this kind of theme that I think pre-coronavirus, we would not have expected anyone to throw themselves into this virtual connection stuff, because really, you know, we've always been looking for in-person connections, but we're discovering the value of connecting to people online, and that's fantastic. So if you're running events and activities of your own, I would love to see the things and the stories that you do. None of them would be this big. Like having that many people in an event that you're running, we don't expect it at all. Although, having said that, it's actually pretty easy to do. I can show you how. But no, more and more of our activities are like this. And actually, we're starting to see one of the big news for this week has been we're seeing a number of communities around the world are starting to return to the early signs of normality. So as lockdown eases back just a little bit, they're being careful. It's great to see our members being very aware of social distancing and staying safe. So a lot of the things are things like outdoor activities, going for a walk, keeping you distant, but still getting connected. So if you're in one of those areas here, we've got you know, a mix of virtual events, BYO drinks, going for a walk, that sort of stuff. That's fantastic to see. So we want to see as much of that as possible, and good on all the people who are organising these events and activities. One of the things that I wanted to just let everyone know is the whole process of corona crisis and virus and lockdown has been very traumatic for everybody. When the crisis happened, this graph we're looking at is the number of attendees at our events. It fell off a cliff. It just was, you know, we were starting to grow new communities in a number of places, particularly in the US, with a real focus. We had this help from health plans and a number of partners to really support the community and grow. And then suddenly, bang, it just got turned off. My team and I spent crazy 6 weeks trying to build features that would allow people to connect in the new world. And that's where all our new virtual activities and so on have come from. And so it's been such a reward to see within a pretty short space of time, we've tripled our weekly number of people coming to events and activities to 3 times what they were previously. And we're expecting to keep on multiplying. We're seeing more members joining from around the world. The awareness of the issue is higher than it's ever been before. And kind of, I think a lot of people are realizing that Stitch really is unique. There's nothing out there that's been built with this in mind. How do we create positive social connections to people in a variety of ways and really support our community? So that's been fantastic. One thing that happened to us in the last week has been, we've got some great coverage on national TV in Australia and the UK. If you go to stitch.net videos, you'll be able to see a piece with an interview myself and a couple of our community champions in Australia, Linda and Jim, did a great job talking about what Stitch means to them and what they're doing. And it's just a nice story about Stitch. So check that out. We've had a lot of new members join as a result, and ironically, what then happens is then that leads to more stories, which then spreads the word about Stitch. So it's a very much of a snowball sort of thing. The same thing happened in the UK, and this was not anything we had to do with at all, but we were covered in a morning TV show where an expert actually mentioned Stitch as something that they would recommend people join to deal with the fact that we're all isolated and disconnected at the moment. And as a result, suddenly we've had this massive surge in activities and members in the UK. So we're really excited. We've got a lot of connections to our members in the UK, but we haven't, up until recently, had the ability to reach out and grow. And now that's starting to happen. So we're really looking forward to hearing more and more stories from our UK members, and as well as Canada, New Zealand. We've had a bunch of new countries where new members are starting to create things. So that's fantastic. Another piece of good news stories. This is a picture of Richard and Anne, and you can read their story on the Stitch blog. So stitch.net/blog, and you can find out all about, there's so many articles. I write them and people never seem to know about them. So I've been told I need to let people know where the blog actually is. So that's where we publish stories about what's happening in the community. And Anne and Richard actually joined Stitch a few years ago, opposite sides of the world. So Richard was from New York, Anne was from California, and they met through Stitch and then found that they were like-minded and connected, and actually then met in person at one of our global get-togethers a couple of years ago in California. Fast forward to now, they're both living in New York, and they were kind enough to then share their story. So they wrote from their own perspective about what it was like and some interesting insights into how to find a like-minded companion through something like Stitch, because it can be difficult. One thing everyone needs to understand is there's a lot of assumptions about making new friends, and people kind of assume it's easy because that's what happened when we were younger. But the reality is making new friends is really, really difficult. And there's a range of reasons for that, and we are very aware of them. But if you're finding yourself stuck, just be aware that it's really challenging. So some of these stories are really rewarding and I think quite inspiring. So if you've got a story of your own, it doesn't even need to be about the sort of relationship that Richard and Anne found, but new friends you've found through Stitch. Those stories are really powerful because they help spread that word to other members who would like to join. So send them through and we can share them in future videos. So here's another thing I would love to share with you. And I could read it, I could let you read it on the screen, but I think probably better if I read it out. So back to our UK community, we had one of our very first Icebreaker event, Quick Stitch Icebreaker in the UK. And I received an email the following day from someone, and I'll read to you an excerpt. It said, "Hi Andrew, a great big thank you for last night. It meant more to me than I'd ever imagined. I hadn't had a conversation with anyone for several weeks. And this is the reality we're dealing with right now. I was surprised at the warmth and shared empathy there was, especially in the first chat room. There was another lady who'd also suffered a recent bereavement, as I have. I lost my only sister in February, not to COVID. I was able to identify with her experience of having a family funeral at this time of restrictions. I also found that we were all missing actual human contact because of lockdown. I'm so glad I stumbled onto Stitch when I was browsing, looking for a way to connect with others while I'm in isolation without any family or network of friends." She also shared that she'd been very hesitant, hadn't shared a photo, because like most people, when you first join a new thing, you're not really sure. You need to check it out. And that's an experience for a lot of new members of Stitch. But she said, "After some research and your invitation for last night, I decided to proceed. I'm extremely happy and excited that I did. I look forward to becoming more involved. Stitch seems to be promising me a lifeline at this very traumatic and isolated period of my life." So I can't tell you how much that meant to me to receive a message like that. We receive a lot of messages every day from people who are struggling with technology or they need help or support. And typically it's about what's not working for Stitch. So when people take the time to write in to tell us what Stitch actually means to them, it helps sustain us, because building Stitch, a community like this, is actually really challenging. It's challenging from a financial perspective to get the resources to build what we need to do, and things like that. We're a very small team. And the one thing that keeps us going is knowing that we're working on something that's really meaningful and means a lot to people. So when you do send something like that, honestly, for me and the team and even other community champions, it makes a huge, huge difference. So if you'd like to share and send that sort of thing, particularly if you're willing for us to share it externally, that's great. But even if it's just for us, it makes a difference. So thank you. Finally, the other thing that happened this week was we launched the Stitch volunteering program. So if you don't know, Stitch, the community itself is a not-for-profit. with a focus on addressing isolation and loneliness. But of course, for most Stitch members, we're not lonely. The whole point of the community is it's about fun and vibrant connection. So people might hear about Stitch and be isolated for some reason, but when they join, the idea is we don't want to talk about loneliness again and again. So actually, we have a separate website for that. The website is wipeoutloneliness.org, and feel free to check it out. That's where we share information about the impact of loneliness on health, and there's a lot of really interesting research that's showing how important it is for everyone so much these days. But one thing we've been doing is growing, how do we activate new communities? And the initiative we worked on the last couple of months that's really taking off is our volunteering program. So if you go to the website and you can click Get Involved, it will run you through the various types of volunteering through Stitch. One thing that people are probably familiar with are community champions who create activities in their area, build connections, that sort of things. But there are other ways to get involved too. It's about spreading the word or helping people who might be disadvantaged or sharing your skills with the community to help make it better, things like that. You can volunteer even if you're not a member yet, not a full member yet, or if you are. Either way, you can become a volunteer, and what it means is we help you get connected to other members who are also building the community, help with some resources that you might need to make it easier for you, and you know, a Stitch membership and so on. But really, at the end of the day, it's not about what you get out of it. Like most things for volunteering, it's kind of what you put in is actually really enriching and rewarding. And most of our volunteers, once they've started, they just do it forever because it's such a great benefit for themselves, but they're also helping a lot of other people as well. So that was our big news this week was volunteering, and already we're starting to see people volunteering I think we had 39 in the last few days from all around the world. And what that's going to mean is as those volunteers start to get more and more active, we start to see just this explosion of community activity. So we're really looking forward to it. I did say I'd talk about some bad news. I'm going to save the bad news about what the community is struggling with, but if you want a sneak peek, just check out the Stitch blog and you'll see it. On a more mundane note, if you're wondering why it looks like I've got black eyes, it's because I do. I've had a really, really challenging time with my eyes where I've had needles poked in them and there was blood coming out of them in the last couple of days. So I'm actually kind of struggling to see the screen, I've got to say. I'm hoping I'll be back with you in 100% health shortly. It's been really struggling challenge to try to type while I can't see things. But that's my bad news for the week. And if that's the worst it gets, then that's okay. So stay tuned for the next one. Please give us your feedback. As I said, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more and the sorts of things you'd like to hear. You would like to hear more from what's happening in the community, from the team, stuff we've got planned, that sort of stuff. Give us your feedback and we'll cover it next week. Until then, bye for now.